Harry, is in the earlier stream you said people may need to increase calcium intake if you're in a population with pastoral ancestry, European, northern. Yep, yeah, I did say that. There are the same genes do exist in African people as well. The difference is they are what we call the ancestral. I can't remember the exactly alleles, because they could actually either be an AT or a GC. So I just can't remember. I think the ones in the ancestral are AA or TT, and the ones that pastoral people have the GGCC, I think, from memory. It's a while since I looked at that study. I haven't made the video yet, but what it does is it means that it either if you're homozygous, which means you've got two of the alleles that down-regulate the uptake of calcium, well then, most ancestral people could uptake calcium from ruminant animals that they hunted very easily, really well. But because of pastoralism for the last 10,000 years, a lot of populations have had these genes down-regulated. So northern Chinese that tended to, have more dairy in their diet, Central Asians, most Europeans, people like the Maasai and a few others, many in the Middle East that consumed camel's milk. Those populations that were getting a much higher level of calcium in the diet have down-regulated, because you need a certain level of, but not too much calcium, there's too much as well. And so populations that consumed quite a bit of dairy product, they've down-regulated that genetic pathway, so they uptake from the gut much less. So if you're doing a pure carnivore diet, just muscle meat, nothing else, you could end up, and especially if you're doing also like taking supplemental, I always recommend people that are doing supplemental menaquinone 4 to take also with that, eat calcium-rich foods, not to just do it on their own, just to avoid any low serum levels. You'll know quite quickly, because if your low serum levels get too low, you'll have a higher heart rate. And immediately you'll know, oh, shit, my serum levels have dropped too much. That's how I know with mine. So I'm very careful in that regard, because I know I've got those genetics. So I've got the homozygous, both alleles. I'm not polymorphism with one or of each, which I have some people have a slightly better uptake. I've got both because my ancestors were primarily pastoralists. So, well, on both sides of the family, pastoralists, which pretty much means that I need to consume more calcium. I can't do just a traditional meat only. And that's why I do not recommend to all carnivores. I usually do encourage them to eat a bit of dairy. I know it's frowned on within the carnivore or the paleo carnivore community, but my sort of view to them is, if you're a Hadza or a San person of the Kalahari, fine, you could argue that point. But if you're a European, most of people in the Europe, large proportions, probably 2/3, if not more, usually have these genetics, and you may end up with a slightly subclinical serum level of calcium, and it explains largely the high levels in Europe, and some of these populations are higher levels of osteoporosis as well, because we've reduced our dairy intake and meat consumption as well, and so we're getting far less calcium in the diet, and we've got genetics that are really working against us. Where we look at certain other populations that actually consume more plants and smaller amounts of meat, but don't get as severe osteoporosis. And people are going, I wonder why. Well, I can tell you why, because they don't have those genetics. They can uptake calcium from vegetables and from meat much better. So on a mixed diet, some of these people don't have that problem in Southeast Asia and places like that, because they don't have those genetics. So they can actually uptake calcium very easy. Thank you very much. But Europeans don't have that. That's why amongst the European descendant type populations, osteoporosis is much higher and more prevalent. And not only on people doing plant-based diets. So we're talking about endemic throughout the whole population because of those genetics. So you think that you don't need calcium extra beyond what you get from the meat? Well, think again. So that's my disagreement with a lot of carnivores on that in that area. And I've got evidence to back that up, which is there's good population studies that can show those comparisons, but also the genetics, and the genetics nail it for me as far as I'm concerned. Sort of explain the differences. So, well, anyway, that's my opinion. And people disagree with me. My view is I don't really give a shit. Okay. Does it also work the other way for people that aren't in those populations? Yeah. They have better ability to uptake, especially I did mention Southern Chinese, yes. And Hello Kitty's here, so she's probably happy about that. A better uptake. But look, even if you come from a region in the south, you still may have some of these genes, because people move around. So you don't know what your ancestry is until you actually check your genetics. So I was surprised. I thought most of my ancestry came from Central Greece and Southern Greece, but I actually had a lot of ancestral blood also from northern parts of Greece. So I was quite surprised. I thought I had nothing from those areas. So people move around. Let's put it that way. So just because you come from a region doesn't necessarily mean that all your genes, or particular, you may have 90% of your genetics coming from there and 10% coming from the northern part. And those 10%, some of those could be related to calcium. I know, how annoying, but that's the reality. So unless you check, you don't really know. So one way of actually looking at that is doing tests and finding out what your serum levels are. And if your serum levels are way low than the general population is, at a very low band, it's sort of an indication that if you're eating the same stuff and people are not getting those low serum levels and you are, you're likely have got those genetics. It's one way. Another way is avoiding any calcium sort of rich food, and seeing whether your heart rate goes really high. It's another bit of a giveaway. It's a reason why a number of European descendant carnivores say, "Oh, I went on carnivore and my heart rate went up. I was doing muscle meat only." And I go, "Okay, yeah, you got a calcium issue, mate." So, yeah, that's an easy one. But a lot of carnivores out there don't really understand that, which is unfortunate, and they miss it completely, because it's not something that people are thinking of.
No, they just think that they're eating meat and that's going to be enough for them. Like you just said, there's examples.
Also, it's enough if you're an African descent,
Yeah,
and you're somebody with the proper genetics, it's fine.
you have the right
I
to
can't.
use it.
I'm not going to argue with it. If somebody says a Hadza person can do that, I'm going to go, I agree. Somebody from Samburu, San people of Kalahari, I'll agree.
Mm.
But there is 10,000 years of agricultural, and that's actually meant that we've got high amounts of amylase. That doesn't mean it's still contraindicated, plant foods, but it just means that we can tolerate them better than the Africans, tribes people. But at the same time, we've also got some of these other things, retinol for the Irish, because of cod liver oil. Icelandic people and all that. That means they need more retinol than the rest of us. Another issue, fat soluble vitamins, differences. So there's all these little things, and I always say, tell me what your ancestors did and where you came from, and I'll probably tell you what you should consider in your diet if you want to